In Hong Kong, 43 protesters facing rioting charges have been released on bail. This is the first set of activists to be charged since protests began over 2 months ago.
The defendants are among 49 arrested in connection with Sunday's violent clashes in Central and Western District. Police announced late last night that 44 have been charged with rioting and have not ruled out making further arrests.
And this prompted another wave of protests. This morning, hundreds of protesters gathered outside Eastern Court to show support for the defendants.
Braving the storm, crowds rallied for hours chanting slogans. Our Hong Kong correspondent Roland Lim tells us more.
Now, despite the impending typhoon signal warning by the Hong Kong Observatory, droves of protesters arrived to support the 44 that are charged with rioting. Now, the rioting charge, of course, is the most serious of the public order ordinance, and these are the first batch of protesters to be charged with rioting since protests began more than 2 months ago.
Among the 44 charged, 28 were male, 16 were female. Now, 7 of the defendants were aged under 20 and the youngest a 16-year-old schoolgirl, most of the rest in their 20s. Many of the defendants told the court they were students. Others gave their occupation as nurse, teacher or clerk. Now, all of those who appeared in court were granted a bail of $128 and most were given a curfew of between midnight and 6 a.m. All but one, an airline pilot, was banned from leaving Hong Kong. Now, the magistrate allowed the pilot to leave Hong Kong on condition he provides prosecutors with his flight schedule. A 24-year-old Putonghua-speaking student, the 45th defendant in the case, was charged with possession of an offensive weapon, an extendable baton.
The cases for most of the defendants have been adjourned until September. Rioting carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. Roland Lim, CNA, Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong police have come under more criticism after an officer aimed a shotgun at protesters last night. This happened when clashes broke out at Kwai Chung Police Station hours after it was announced that protesters would be charged with rioting.
In a statement today, the force defended the sergeant who raised his weapon, saying he felt his life was threatened and that the gun was only loaded with beanbag rounds. It said policemen at the scene were attacked by radical demonstrators throwing objects at them, and some protesters splashed a corrosive liquid on them.
24 officers were reported injured in the conflict last night. And for insight into all of these happenings, we'll be speaking to an expert in Hong Kong later in the hour.